Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ayesha Zafar. I'll be moderating this session today. I, on behalf of Institute of Regional Studies, welcome our worthy guests in the audience who have joined us online to this webinar titled Role of Social Media and Perception Building, Case of Cambridge Analytica. Firstly, I would like to invite Mr. Ammad Farooq, Head Cybersecurity Program, IRS, to give his introductory remarks. Sir.
Thank you, Ayesha. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. It's really a pleasure that all of you could find time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. I think it's a topic of great significance and interest of all of us. Social media is so ingrained in our culture that it's now a daily activity for the majority of the people across the globe. And it's not only for the established networks like Twitter, Instagram, that are also some new networks are also gaining users every day, like TikToks and Twitch, which are attracting brands who want to advertise to engage new audiences as well. According to a report by Statistica, in 2021, over 4.26 billion people were using social media worldwide, a number projected to increase to almost 6 billion by 2027. As social media is now also considered as an important pillar of democracy, politicians around the world now started using it as a tool to shape the public opinion and agenda. It helps political parties around the world to reach out to the masses. Cambridge Analytica may have been the perfect poster child for how data can be misused. There are legal and ethical concerns about how micro-targeting is used across the political spectrum. Anyone who values democracy should find out this concerning. Social media algorithms, as they said, they are neutral, but I think their tool is not neutral and they are primed to keep users engaged with their platforms. As a result, some platforms' algorithms systematically recommend disinformation, fake news, and conspiracy theories, and are ripe for manipulation. We all know that the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but the data. So the concerns related to its fair usage and privacy are greater now. I'm sure all the speakers who are extremely learned and have expertise on this area will enlighten us with their views. So over to you, Ayesha, and once again, welcome you all and thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Humans for centuries have relied on information. However, little is known how this information affects our perceptions. One who holds the power of technology holds the power to rule. In contemporary times, social media is an important part of our life and has the power to shape and build a perception, as Sir Ammad had elaborated. With increased connectivity and its instrumental role in political fabric, the world was first exposed to one of the greatest vulnerabilities of social media in 2018, Cambridge Analytica, concerning personal data privacy. It had been discovered that the political advisory from the unlawfully bought the data of 50 million Facebook users in order to shape public opinion in favor of Donald Trump and Brexit referendum. Keeping in view the importance of this case in the upcoming election, Cybersecurity Desk at Institute of Regional Studies is conducting this debate. Without further ado, I would now give floor to Ms. Pelin Vardarlier, Associate Professor, Head of Human Resources Management in Istanbul, Medipol University, Turkey. In 2014, she completed a PhD project called Role of Social Media and Human Resources Management. She graduated from the Bacon University. Ma'am.
Thank you so much. First of all, Selamun Aleyküm, greetings everyone. My name is Pelin. I am an associate professor at the Istanbul Medipol University. I'm working in a HRM and social media together, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for your invitation and Institute of Regional Studies and Islamabad. And I want to share my presentation as well. Now today we are discussing about the webinar title is the role of social media in perception building case of Cambridge Analytica. So I just want to start my presentation with the Nelson Mandela's word. A critical, independent and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. So freedom of expression and freedom of the media are essential to any democratic process, the conduct of media is a key factor in whether an election is judged free and fair. The Union Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression has, for example, noted that an election can be declared not fair when access to state-owned media, in particular, is not handled in a fair manner. So you can see the media play three critical roles during an election period. These are the important, and first of all, the media provides platforms for parties and candidates to express their political opinion and convey their policies. And the second one is the media provides information to voters and electoral process, such as voter registration and polling arrangements. And the third one is the media acts as a watchdog for free and fair election by uncovering and reporting an abuses of electoral process and political bias. Ultimately, the media can help to ensure the voter is able to make an informed choice and that the election has integrity. And the other thing is steps, how can we step the government may undertake to minimize micro-targeting in political sphere. So it is, I think it's too early to give a definitive policy advice regarding online political micro-targeting. We simply do not yet know enough about the practice and its effects. If research shows that the advantage clearly outweighs the disadvantage, perhaps policymakers should not do much. On the other hand, if the advantage outweighs the advantage, solution must be found. Unfortunately, at this moment, the precise working and effect of online political micro-target are unclear. First, there is a need for more information on micro-targeting and thus for more research. For example, it is still an open question what the effect of political micro-targeting on citizens are. So this research also should include the normative competence. We need to determine at this point we decided the benefit of the micro-targeting outweigh of risks. And for instance, parties could be required to disclose how much money they spent on online political micro-targeting. There are precedents for such rules. And what could be done in the short term when we look at this perspective? Perhaps policymakers could even consider an outright ban on online political micro-targeting, and which could be limited to election period. Such a rule could apply only to political parties, but may then risk being circumvented through third-party online political micro-targeting. For this perception and the result is of, we can say that if the research or experience show that the micro-targeting is indeed a problem that needs a solution, more substantive regulation could be considered. For example, campaign expenditure restriction could be imposed on political parties, placing caps on online political micro-targeting. And when we look at is it possible to legislate measure for self-regulation on social media companies? Yes, the first point of discussion is the choice of rules that should preside over the oversight of content moderation. While there is a growing consensus that international standards on human rights provide the appropriate universal legal framework, there may be different ways to apply this body of rules. And the social media company could simply refer to these rules directly. And the authoritative interpretation by international and regional courts and special mechanism would provide all necessary guidance to inform the social media company's decision. So another option would be to adapt a code of human rights principle for content moderation. And the specific adaptation of international standards to online content moderation through the adoption of a code would ensure that the social media companies operate under stricter guidance than the broad reference to international standards. So in both cases, as is generally the situation with the application of international standards, a certain margin of appreciation or margin of flexibility would be part of the social media company mechanism. So now when we look at Cambridge Analytica, this is the so important example of the social media crisis. So Facebook has dramatically agreed to send a lawsuit seeking damages for allowing Cambridge Analytica access to private data of tens of millions of users. 4 years after the Observe exposed the scandal that mired the tech giant in repeat controversy. So at the finally, Facebook pays $643,000 fine for role in Cambridge Analytica scandal. When we look at the timeline, how is it start and what it during this time, what will happen? So you can see the Facebook suspend Cambridge Analytica and SCL group. It started 16th of March, and then the Observer and New York Times reported this. So after that, we can see the delayed Facebook hashtag trending on Twitter. So this is also the big mistake, because after this, Elon Musk also delayed Tesla and SpaceX Facebook page, and Zuckerberg apologized. I'm really sorry that this happened. So this is the big crisis management for during this time, and this is developing like that. And we can see the chart, as you can see the chart, the Cambridge Analytica political consulting firm. CEO is the Alexander Nix, Vice President Steve Banner. So they are all together a SCL group, British PR firm that does work for government and politicians and militaries worldwide. So these are work on Trump company. So this is the big scandal of this. And when we look at Cambridge Analytica, how the key players are linked, we can understand from this chart, because, you know, Alexander Cohen is also founder of the Global Science Research, and he is an associate professor at the State University, Petersburg. And Alexander Nix is also CEO of both CGL Election and Cambridge Analytica UK, and they work together. And the other person is the Steve Bannon. He is the former vice president of Cambridge Analytica. You can see that. And the other player is Robert Mercer. He is a funds Cambridge Analytica. So you can see the key players are linked. Cambridge Analytica, how is it going? And trusting privacy setting in social media accounts is a beginning. And although more powerful account setting and tools can help protect your privacy, there are other ways in which your personal information may be infiltrated. Knowing and targeting these potential privacy risks will help protect your data. When an application is concerned about amount of information it wants to grant access to, it is best not to install that application at all. And when we look at misinformation, so this is another definition of the social media, and Jan Thomas said that misinformation can feel like an insurmountable problem. some things that only tech giants and social media platforms can solve. But actually, we can each take steps to help stop its spreading. And this action will have a direct impact on your own communities, friends, and family. So, misinformation, the accidental spread of inaccurate information, makes it harder for people to find the best, most reliable content online. So it can also cause fear, panic, and hate, making a difficult situation even more challenging. As communicator, we need to get ahead of false narratives, make sure people can spot misinformation before they share it, and target it directly on the platforms where it is spreading. So, increase digital literacy for the people most vulnerable to misinformation. So, in order to fight misinformation that is the circulating about issue space, so get ahead of the narrative to stop misinformation before it takes hold, and increase digital literacy for the people in your audience who are most vulnerable to misinformation. And another one is target information on the platforms where it is spreading, and flood those platforms with good information. And because the development of technology, social media, which allows us to be faster in terms of communication, gives us innovative freedom on this issue. Voice or video communication can be established from almost anywhere from many channels without noticing the distance with only one button. And companies can make agreements that allow them to use brand-related activities on this site, such as liking, sponsor, shared with social network. And to avoid sharing too much information, you should check your application settings, and considering how social networks work, your friends' privacy setting have a direct impact on your privacy. If your friends have fewer restrictive settings, it becomes possible for a wider audience to see what you share. When using social media society, it is necessary to create public opinion and pressure on social media tools to be regulated in an accountable manner to the whole world. So I want to explain about Cambridge Analytica, another perspective, the social media environment, by becoming the noise of the very different voices, and chaos cries communication as an example of very different opinion and thoughts. And Cambridge Analytica's crisis in social media is one of the examples. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you so much for the excellent presentation, ma'am. Audience are requested to type their comments and questions in the chat box. Now I am pleased to give floor to Mr. Waqas Jan. He is director at G5 Internet Observatory and holds on avid interest in exploring both quantitative and discursive approaches to fake news and disinformation. He's currently providing hands-on research and policy advisory related to South Asian peace, conflict, and security studies with a particular focus on digital spaces. Sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to you all, and a very good morning. Thank you for having me today on this very important and timely topic. I think the role of social media in what we're seeing these days, especially in the current political climate, I think it's something that has become very, very negative. Of course, there are certain positive and negative aspects to how we can see the digital domain playing a role in the lives of people across the world, not just our country. But I think over the last few months, we've seen social media turn into an increasingly divisive, polarized, and a very sort of messy place for everyone. And which is also a reason why the social media as a whole has taken a very negative hit in terms of its own perceptions and what we see. So considering how, excuse me, considering how we're seeing that this is likely to play an even more important role in the coming months, especially with the scheduled elections and how we see the space evolving in terms of civil-military relations and whatnot. I think the case of Cambridge Analytica is very important to revisit here. And I think it's important before getting into it to see exactly what it is that they did. I think Professor Pelin did an excellent job to give an overview of what it is that Cambridge Analytica was, how it started, and what was what was the actual funding and the intentions behind it. But in terms of how they did it, I think it's very interesting from a text perspective and a data perspective. They built, mind you, these are just students out of Cambridge University. These are students and data analysts just playing with data and are trying to basically explore new ways of, uh, of how to use data and how to basically generate insights from them that are useful for a lot of different spheres and domains. For example, data analysis has its own place in financial analysis and economic analysis, but to basically transfer that to the social sciences, to see how it's basically pushed to build psychometric profiles and to influence and to change narratives from a political perspective, I think that's a very interesting topic in itself. So what these guys did was that they built they used, I think, the data from about 40 million users. They built a Facebook app, and with that, it was sort of a survey. So while it was a gamified system that was being used by participants to interact and provide the information, the data that they were mining was basically personality profiles. They were using the Ocean model to see that how each user was basically could be categorized within a psychometric system. For example, whether they were more agreeable, whether they were open, whether they had narcissistic tendencies, whether they were open to new experiences. Now, mind you, these techniques have been used from a marketing perspective for quite some time. But to apply this tool in mass across vast distances, across multiple demographic things, that's a powerful tool to have. So using that tool, of course, now, and like Ammad mentioned at the beginning, data is the new oil. So if you have the psychometric profiles of around 50 million users, there's a lot you can do with it. That data is very, very valuable. It can be used to basically sell them what it is they like. It can be used to target certain ads towards them. And it could also be used to target certain narratives towards them that you would possibly have a higher chance of them being purchased by them, for lack of a better word in this case. So how that basically now from a research perspective, like I mentioned, that's very, very interesting. And to be able to en masse view and visualize the changing patterns, perceptions, and the changing tastes of people en masse is very exciting. But then there's an added dimension to it that when you bring out behavioral change as a result of that, when you use that data and you try to basically push it in a certain direction. For example, we know there's already a precedent for it all in Orwellian literature and whatnot, that in order to be a good consumer, in order to be a good citizen, you have to be a good consumer. Or in order to be a good citizen, you have to be someone who's willing to be open to certain things or not willing to talk about certain things. So once you build that model and once you use that to bring about behavioral change in mass, that is something that is very, I would say, controversial and something that is very understudied at the moment as well. And its impact is something that we're only just beginning to realize. In our own case, I think the political polarization over the last few months, especially we saw the press conference yesterday, the historic press conference, how much importance was and how many times social media was referred to as one of not just the mediums, but one of the causes of this polarization as well. So that is in itself something that is likely to be studied more and is likely to be discussed even more in settings like these. So knowing that what they did and basically why it matters today, it was also important to understand basically the theoretical constructs that sort of ground these approaches. There's this excellent book by Singer and Brookings about Like War, which they basically talk about how the digital space is basically a battleground right now. We hear the word fifth generation warfare get used, and I feel that it's become an overused trope at this point, just saying it for the sake of it. But to actually understand how information operations are run, and not just for political actors, but even by hostile countries and whatnot, it's a very interesting domain, which I feel requires a lot more study. And for anyone who's interested in data analysis or social sciences or international relations, I feel that it's a very understudied opportunity. So for anyone who's willing to, possibly researchers who are trying to do their PhD or looking for new topics, I highly recommend that this is a topic that all you students look into, and especially how to see that how data can be scraped, harvested, and analyzed from a quantitative perspective, combining that with traditional methods like discourse analysis, context analysis, and whatnot. So I think Singer and Brookings do a good job. They sort of sensationalize the whole thing, that how it's just a battleground and there are all these narratives are basically flying around like missiles. I wouldn't take it that far, but it is definitely something that is worth discussing and giving its due importance. A more technical way to view it is, I think the term also gets used around, is basically computational propaganda. Now, that's something I think that's been discussed in information journals as well. And the way it's basically, and the premises for that is basically that, well, living in a globalized world where the internet offers you this anonymous identity, and basically also to have this approach automated through machine learning and whatnot, the way perception management can be pushed, as in the case of Cambridge Analytica, is something that has become increasingly pervasive. It's become increasingly deceptive, and something that is rapidly evolving. I mean, we all know about how deep fakes go about, be it their video or be it their audios, but it's a constant it's a constant game of cat and mouse. That of course the new technologies come up to fool. To basically bypass certain mechanisms, and then technology catches up to basically bust them. That's a problem with fake news. I mean, it's one of the most pervasive problems, even at us at G5IO, that we have to face. That, of course, in a world where computational propaganda is rife, how do you how do you sift through the truth from fiction? And how do you do it in a mass scale, in an environment where data is coming in seconds, and then basically just in volumes that are basically near impossible to monitor on a human level. And then the whole, if you look at it from a discourse analysis perspective, what what uh, what is the truth in a way? That what are the factors that assign a certain data point as making it true or credible? Is it just a verified tick on a Twitter profile? Is it a past history of saying one thing and then saying the other? Or is it just something that's an anonymous account with a hash as sort of a with the hex code as sort of the screen name? So it's something that is evolving. It's something that is dangerous, and I think and also exciting in its own way for all the opportunities it brings. But it is something that definitely requires more focus from a policy and from a tech perspective. Now, I know I've touched on how it's basically negative and whatnot, and perhaps, but I think it's important to understand that the way all this data is impacting our society as a whole. And this ties into basically electoral choices as well. But from a social science perspective, I mean, there's also this book, Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Reilly. And I think it's very interesting for anyone who's a social science student to see how the world has been framed in all these quantitative models. I mean, economic students would know this as well, that once you frame a human being as a rational actor, or once you frame them in an artificial construct of someone that is a value maximizer, it sort of takes the nuance away from the complexities of what a human being actually is. I might be getting a bit more philosophical here, but this touches upon the psychometric profile Cambridge, the guys there, the researchers there built. That is it even possible to quantify or to construct a human personality within a machine system? I mean, AI comes to mind immediately, but does that and the way does that really define the essence of humanity, of what we are, our history, our values, our cultures, and whatnot? And secondly, does that really have the power to change it in all its entirety? As technology becomes cheaper and smaller, of course, there's a sort of the way humans and machines are interacting and the way it's becoming basically the boundary line between them is disappearing, and likely too from a science fiction perspective. But how is that changing and how that's basically transformed our society as a whole? My phone has become an extension of my body. It's something that is almost near a part of me and is extension of mine, and this is likely to get smaller and more integrated. Our screen times show that how much time we spend looking at a screen basically defines what we are and what we've become and how we interact in our other relationships. So in a way, the way our society has become and changed is, I think Byung-Chul Han said it excellently in his new book, that we become an infocracy, that basically it's this obsession with something that is being smooth and something that is decentralized, and that even though we're more connected, we've actually become even more distant. And which ties in exactly to narratives as well, that with all this information that we are bombarded by, there's still something that's essentially missing, which is that what is it that binds us? What is that value that basically binds that to truth and whatnot? So information without a narrative is just information, it's not truth. And it's this obsession with being the first, being that has basically distorted this notion between fact and fiction. Now, bringing it all back to elections and how social media does that, I think it's important to bear all these, basically this work, this excellent work that's been done, to keep in mind that when we talk about how our own political parties are using social media to push a certain discourse, to push a certain narrative, and to basically play with that fine line between truth and fiction, it's important to keep in mind that as users of social media, and I think Professor Pelin did mention some excellent ways to limit that, about how we ensure our data is private and how we ensure that we stay informed of that. But it's very important to realize how it is and what data it is that we're exactly giving to all these social media companies out there. Everything you write, everything you tweet, every selfie you take, every time you tag a location on Instagram, that's generating a data point that is likely to be harvested and used by, if not you, but some social media company or some researcher like myself and the team at G5IO, to basically see, engage, and basically predict, use that information for our own purposes. Now, those could be for research purposes, those could be for marketing purposes, or at the end, those could be for political engineering and perception management. And I think with that, I'd like to end that, and I'll be happy to take any questions that come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the in-depth analysis. Now I would invite Ms. Aamna Rafiq, Research Associate in the Arms Control and Disarmament Center at the Institute of Strategic Studies, to help us further expand the debate. She has completed her BS Hons, Politics and International Relations from International Islamic University, Islamabad, with gold medal, distinction and first position. Her fields of interest include cyberspace, emerging technologies, arms control and disarmament. Ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. I'm grateful to the Institute of Regional Studies for organizing this discussion and giving me the opportunity to share my views. I also want to appreciate the two other panelists. They rightly highlighted the roles of media during the election period in a democratic country, dynamics and the effects of online micro-targeting, positive and negative implications of social media, and shift from using data from economic domain to the social domain. I would like to start with a quote from Mr. Joseph Nye. He said, and I quote, "In the information age, it's not just whose army wins, but whose story wins." So what kind of stories we have these days? These are the Facebook stories, Instagram stories, and millions of the other stories that appear on the news feeds and timelines of our social media accounts, which we share on daily basis, believing that we are capable of differentiating between real and the fake content. Today, social media is not the subset of the internet. Social media is a de facto internet where fake stories travel much faster, further, and deeper than the truth. So the role played by the social media in the upsurge of the fake news and the controlled narrative building during the political processes and the decision making at the national and international level has produced far-reaching effects on the global and the national security. Fake news circulating on social media, directly or indirectly, affected the election results of approximately 18 to 20 countries in the period of last 6 to 7 years. The Cambridge Analytica is the biggest example of this narrative building. It is a firm that worked for the Donald Trump campaign, harvested the personal data of the millions of the Facebook profiles, and Facebook breached data protection laws by failing to keep users' personal information secure. This firm also used the data to influence several elections around the world, and it was also believed that it was in contact with the executive from the giant Russian company. Its name also echoed in Britain during the investigation of the Cambridge Analytica's role in disinformation and how it helped in swinging the results of the referendum in favor of Brexit. Twitter also sold its data to some other political consultancy firms. So what's in it for Pakistan? So before analyzing the actual impact of the social media and the prospects of Cambridge Analytica happening in Pakistan, it is important to have a realistic overview of Pakistan's digital landscape. There's no doubt that Pakistan is witnessing a growth in social media usage in last 6 to 7 years, and especially in the last 5 to 6 months. At the start of the 2022, internet penetration in Pakistan was 36.5% of the total population. It is approximately like 82.90 million users with 71.70 million active social media users. So in the ranking of the digital apps in Pakistan, YouTube is on the top with 71.7 million users, followed by the Facebook and the Twitter. So these figures tell us that more than half of the total population is not using internet, or if I bring it further down, like to be on the safe side, we can say that half population of the Pakistan is not using internet even in October 2022. Second, the important aspect of Pakistan's digital landscape is the emerging growth of the social media advertising. In 2017, the growth rate of the social media ad spending in Pakistan was 13.63, and this year it reached 36.41%, and it is expected to reach 71.20 in 2027. And this is happening because of increasing integration of the social media apps with online shopping marketing, and it is further facilitated by the data collected through the off-app monitoring option within the various social media applications. So data from the social media online shopping platforms along with the off-app search contributes in identify the behavioral and the spending patterns of the patterns for psychological profiling of the online consumers for better shopping experience, as previously discussed by Mr. Waqas. So this data could be potentially replicated for political profiling and advertising. This could also be potentially sold to the different political parties for their election campaigns. But in addition to the political campaign, in my opinion, the misuse of this data by any third party, non-state actor or an enemy state, especially in case of the Pakistan, is really important. This data could be used for creating political instability, civil unrest, and intensifying already existing sectarian and religious divide in the country, spreading disinformation, deepfakes, and propaganda on social issues. These are grave threats for Pakistan. And the most damaging aspect or the dangerous aspect is that it is not a one-time occurrence. The algorithms of these platforms are designed to show more and more same type of stories and the ads, and this constant exposure to the same type of content leaves no space for the diversity and the tolerance for different or the opposite views, resulting in more conflict, social and intellectual intolerance in majority of the social media users. So this is a dangerous because it's happening at a subconscious level. Apparently, we think that we are aware that what is happening, but the way it affects our subconscious we are unable to comprehend that. But still, it's the 36.5% of the population. So what about the rest of the population? Because we see that there is a greater instability currently in Pakistan. Social media is creating narratives, but how this narrative from the social media is shifting to the rest of the population. So in case of the Pakistan, these stories are mainly built by the mainstream news channels and the newspapers. And in the race for the TRPs, majority of them don't check the authenticity and the source of this news. So to conclude, I would suggest that social networking website should prioritize security according to the international law and the norms, but we should also at the state level better regulate the behavior between the governments and ensure that the governments take responsibility for controlling the malicious activity emerging from their borders. And as a citizen and the common users, we have to begin the practice of better cyber hygiene and avoid sharing too much information, as already suggested by the other speakers. So the future will require us all to be more vigilant and preempt the attack. So that's all from my side. I'm looking forward to the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aamna Rafiq. All the presentations were perfectly pitched to the topic. And now I'll conduct the question and answer sessions. First, we have a question from Irta Fatma for Professor Pelin. She asked, ma'am, if we restrict social media platforms, don't you think that freedom of speech would be compromised? Users may create noise against it.
Thank you. I told you media and freedom is the one of the basic condition of the pluralistic and democratic society, and also the right to freedom of expression is a fundamental human rights and at the same time the necessary condition in a democratic system. Therefore, autonomous and pluralistic media are essential to free and open society and for providing information necessary to holding those power to account. Independent and free media are of particular importance and safeguarding human rights and fundamental freedoms. So if I want to give an example, and in recent years we know the documentaries such as Social Dilemma and the Cambridge Analytica also, the confession of former employees of technology companies have led to an increase in those who argue that social media is working on the fabric of life and society. It is not that all digital media should appoint representative to countries and leave their content policies at the mercy of the governments. So on the contrary, we can say that they should open their algorithm and customize it for individuals, while being close to outside intervention in and environments that can accommodate pluralistic thinking. And for example, in my country, if I need to give an example, the Twitter and YouTube ban in Turkey is a heavy burden on freedom of expression, considered an intervention. The latest legal regulation on the internet in cases where personal rights or privacy are violated within the scope of the sites are allowed to be blocked. Thus, this is the regulation by eliminating the balancing system. So freedom of expression is the most important aspect of being a free society and free individual. It is one of these, its components and its presence is felt in democratic societies of others. And attempts to control what we write and say are universal phenomenon. History and across cultures, legal and relational authority has been restricted. And one of the hallmarks of democracy is the subtraction of the risk that accompany freedom of expression is. That is the less than the accompanying. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is from Mahnoor Said. Mahnoor Said and Osama Khalid have somewhat same question. So the question is, you talked about this. The question is directed towards Mr. Waqas. You talked about the upcoming elections in Pakistan. So what can Pakistan do to prevent the type of pre-poll rigging? And Osama asked, I would like to ask that how social media platform can manipulate the elections in Pakistan in the future. So,
thank you. Thank you for your questions. I think how can we stop pre-poll rigging? That I guess is a bit out of my ambit as a researcher. I'm not really sure I'm well advised to basically answer that. But I will take the second question that what kind of role social media will play in elections? But I think the current phenomena we're seeing in terms of how certain parties' narrative is gaining certain traction directly targeted to a certain audience speaks volumes of how basically said party has basically used that to build its own narrative. I mean, if PTI can successfully leverage, take last night's example. After a very historic day, after a very historic press conference, when at 10 o'clock you had all your electronic media channels, all these media pundits come up and talk about what happened during the day on their 10 o'clock talk shows. Chairman of the PTI, Imran Khan, held a Twitter space right at 10 o'clock. And instead of giving an interview to any of these celebrated pundits, he basically spoke to his Twitter audience. So I guess in that sense, I think that's one of the good example of how social media kind of role is going to play for politicians like these to basically bring forth their election campaigns to a wider audience. I don't remember how many listeners tuned in, but I think there were thousands of listeners. And I remember asking around and even sitting among some friends, and the same thing was happening. We were like, put on the news. And I was like, well, look, this is something that's going on as well. And they all tuned in on their phones to Twitter. So, I mean, my parents as well, for someone who's basically grown up on 9 o'clock news and whatnot, they've recently installed Twitter and want to know what's happening via social media. Same thing you have with YouTube channels and vlogs. So the way digital media has disrupted the traditional media industry, I think that pretty much sums up that how it is, what kind of role it's going to play for any political party willing to invest in it and basically push forth their electioneering campaign. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. So I request Ma'am Aamna Rafiq to answer this question. The question is from Fatma Faisal. How safe is it to argue that social media is shaping political narratives for mainstream media and not the other way around? Ma'am.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, how safe is it to argue that social media is shaping political narratives for mainstream media and not the other way around?
Okay. So just like before this question, Mr. Waqas Jan, like kind of give an example of this dynamic, that while the majority of the people were listening to the Twitter space of today's session of the Mr. Imran Khan, while the few were engaging in like using the traditional media. So as I also highlighted in my presentation, that majority of the news channels are picking the news or the facts and the information from the social media, and it's not the other way around. You will hardly see a social media or any major political personalities and or the major activists using the news from the mainstream media on these platforms. So I believe that it's the social media that is playing the major role, not the other way around. Thank you so much.
So the next question is from Shiza Zubairi, and it is directed towards Dr. Pelin. Can you please explain how can a layman cope up with the social media manipulation? And she also asked how to differentiate between a true news and a fake news. Ma'am.
Okay, thank you. First of all, maybe it's good to describe the social media manipulation. This is the name given to tendency of a large audience to believe after an unidentified or unfounded information relieved by both accounts is shared from an account with a large number of followers. And manipulation on social media can be done visibly on unnoticed. And for example, untrue news, as well as opinion and thoughts, and can lead to manipulation. Even a baseless article you read about to sharing research from unsubstantiated sources for information you support on a topic can lead to social manipulation. So first of all, you have to check the information and searching for information, taking advantage of the most basic ways to preventing social uses, information from social feeds, a detailed research on the concept and concept from the eternal little lady, for example, in daily use or before a break somewhere on it. And the other thing is the important thing is not relying on false identities. And today we can see the social media takes place as a world where millions of people live. In the media, there are accounts that represented a real person as well as accounts with both or false identities. So, for example, a research you do about to account before falling for the state manipulation greatly reduce the possibility of manipulation. So the last thing, the last one is I'm going to say by blocking the potential of digital garbage. And while digital garbage is a big word, social media manipulation are based on poorly functioning accounts. Unfollowing social media accounts that do not benefit your personal development and that dominates the majority of your time prevents social media manipulation. So social media accounts which are called popular, which are followed instantly by the Z generation and reach millions of followers are candidates for drugging and individual and life-oriented manipulation. So this is the three important keys about to manipulate for social media. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is from Mirta Fatma, and it is directed to Mr. Waqas. Sir, how can think tanks just like IPRI, IRS, and ISSI can collaborate with federal legislators to regulate the manipulation of social media?
Thank you, Virta. I think that's a very important question, and I think that's something that definitely needs to be more focused on. I think there were a few dialogues held in IPRI based on where we invited multiple stakeholders. These included the lead social media teams from political parties, as well as representatives from PTA and whatnot. And I think there has to be a consensus-built policy towards how it is that social media should be approached from our own culturally sensitive and relevant perspectives. I think one of the major gaps in this is basically the absence of these platforms' own reps within the country. I know there have been certain talks and discussions going on that are basically hoping to have these companies like Twitter, Google, and Facebook have a much more visible presence in the country and not lump Pakistan as part of the Middle East or North Africa region. And that will happen mostly if we have a discussion with these platform reps. And I mean, the case of India is a perfect example. In fact, in India, the way the government has basically used its own economic muscle to basically silence and censor Twitter and to basically take legal action against Twitter offices is going towards a different end. And I think just yesterday, just in the morning, we had this news of Elon Musk taking over Twitter and basically starting a whole new sort of his own words, a way that where free speech is going to be celebrated now. So again, I think we're in interesting times. It's something that is rapidly evolving and something that needs a very proactive approach from the government as well as our policy stakeholders to basically have a very meaningful discussion on this and how to basically take this forward and incorporate and settle these issues on a collective consensus-based level. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from Ahmed Ali, and it is for Ms. Aamna. He asked, as you have mentioned that not even half of the Pakistani population is using social media, but keeping in view the exponential proliferation of social media, how do you think Pakistan would cope with that scenario? Also, does international law addresses that social media issue?
Okay. As far, I will start from the last aspect about the international law. Currently, there is no international treaty on regulating the cyberspace, and in fact, there are a lot of negotiations and the different processes are there at the United Nations addressing the issue of regulating the information and communication technologies. Like there is an open-ended working group, and then there is a group of governmental experts. But at international level, there is a clear divide among the countries, and we are seeing block formation when it comes to the regulation of the social media platforms, because at one end we have a liberal bloc dominated by the US and the Western countries who they are supporting the liberal point of view, and from the liberal point of view, they consider the social media or the internet and the cyberspace as an organic space where all the fundamental human rights and the freedom of expression must be protected. But on the other hand, there is Eastern Bloc, or I could say a much conservative bloc led by the Russia and China, and to some extent Pakistan's position and the stance is also a little bit close to this bloc, and this bloc basically supports the idea of the cyber sovereignty, where the states must be independent to control their cyber borders, and the content is being shared on these social media platforms. So clearly we are seeing ideological divide at the international level, and unless this they come across they cooperate with each other and find a middle ground, I don't think so there would be any development on the international level regarding the legal regulatory regime for the cyberspace. As far as Pakistan is concerned, that half of the Pakistani population is not using, how Pakistan can cope with this. The first thing is formulation of better regulatory regime at national level, as well as formulating laws to deal with these issues. But again, the issue in the states like Pakistan is not the formulation of the laws, but it's the implementation issue. And plus, now there is an increasing negativity or the resentment around the implementation of the laws, or there is a broader perception in Pakistan that certain institutions or the certain groups are using these laws to enhance their own objectives and the political narrative. So I believe that there is also a need in Pakistan to create a positive image of laws and the implementation of these laws, and the bigger responsibility lies with the law enforcement agencies, because they have to improve their overall behavior in the implementation processes to create a positive image about the rules and regulations. Again, it depends on which school of thought you are belonging. Some people say that yes, you can regulate the space. Others believe that no, its control is impossible. So I think the responsibility lies with an individual users. Like the previous speakers also suggested that how we could how we can enhance our understanding about this media, and how we could differentiate between the false news and the true news. So I think the larger responsibility lies with the individual users, and after that, a state could devise strategies and create awareness. But for that, currently, the way and the reputation currently the governments in Pakistan have, I think they need much more credibility and improved reputation to do something about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Aamna. So lastly, we have a comment from Mr. Imran Siddar. He's a research analyst at IRS. He says, in my view, we cannot regulate the social media except a massive awareness and effective use of media. So the focus right now should be on enhancing post-cyber attack strategy, or in other words, managing this social media instead of controlling. And secondly, with the increase of social media platforms, with people having multiple choices, I think it's going to dial down the intensity of information manipulation. So the social media is on auto-regulating. We cannot do much right now. So if any one of the panelists would like to comment on it. Okay, so we conclude the question. So we conclude this question and